Rich Hamblen. He was federal president for 13 months because he built his own machine guns.
Oh, wait a minute. That's an important issue.
And apparently the Second Amendment does not actually apply if you're in the militia. He was a battalion commander in the State Guard. He's a graduate from Vanderbilt University, degree in Greek and Latin, summa cum laude. Intelligent man, built his own machine guns, and apparently the Second Amendment does not actually apply. He has a case in the U.S. Supreme Court right now waiting to be heard. The Supreme Court probably won't hear it. Interesting fact about him, his case went before the Supreme Court at the same time that Heller went before the Supreme Court.
Heller, right. That was the D.C. handgun case.
Exactly. And they decided to take that one instead of his.
Right.
The reason they took that one instead of his is because his had a lot more broad implications to it. They had a lot more, it would have made the Supreme Court look really bad if it had taken his case, because the question in his case would have embarrassed the court.
Well, it was about the militia.
Exactly. Well, the broadest part of the question is, does the Second Amendment bind the state?
It's like this. When I was in prison, I used to point out to the guys that I was in jail with, this is federal prison, understand? I said, if this had been 1907 instead of 2007, none of us would be in jail because none of our activity was against the law. The reason there's so many people in prison these days is because there's too many laws. And what this does is it breeds contempt for all laws, the good ones and the bad ones. The power of the purse and the power of the sword are what is how you run a country. It's how you rule a people. And the power of the purse is completely in the control of the central government, or some would say in control of the banksters. And the same thing is with the power of the sword, because the feds want a monopoly on the means of violence. And because of that, the people become enslaved. Freedom is lost.
Right. Do you expect to hear any answers back from the Supreme Court on your case?
No. To be truthful, no. Reason being, the cases that they hear are totally at their discretion since 1923. And because of that, they'll do like they did to us the time before, where they'll deny my petition for certiorari without comment. And I say they'll deny it because they don't want to have to answer the question. And when they have questions that they don't really want to answer because they can't answer them, they ignore them.
Now, is this the first case that you've brought in front of the Supreme Court, or is it?
No, this is the second time we've been up.
The second time you brought it. How come you were able to bring it in front of the Supreme Court a second time?
When in my initial trial, my jury was instructed, this is pre-Heller, that there is no individual right to keep and bear arms under the U.S. Constitution in the Sixth Circuit.
That was a jury instruction from the.
That was the jury instructions from the
lower
judge.
Court?
From the judge.
From the lower court?
From my trial. In my trial.
Okay.
Yeah. And Heller came along. Heller said that the right to keep and bear arms is individual, subject to regulation. But the Supreme Court has never said that it's not an individual right to keep and bear arms. The government only acts like it has. And that's what we're arguing, because we're arguing that the decision in Heller does not conform with the court's earlier decision in Miller in 1939. And we want to know, well, which one is it, Your Honor?
Is it Heller or is it
Heller or is it Miller? You can't use Miller to back up Heller because they misquote Miller when they talk about it in Heller. So we want to know which one is it.
Right. That's a fair question.
I think it's a fair question too, but it's something that they won't answer because they don't have to. They don't have to because they're the Supremes, baby.
Right. You were telling me earlier that in order for this type of argument to be brought again, because you won't be able to bring this argument again, you would have to have like a similar type of case. Do you ever think that we're going to see a similar type of case where somebody is actually a part of the militia, a recognized part of the militia, and actually has the type of standing or the strength of standing that you actually had in this case? I mean,
I'd be very surprised unless they're absolutely crazy, based on what kind of support I've gotten from the so-called gun lobby, which is zero.
Right.
I mean, we've been basically treated like the skunk at the picnic. They got their agenda, and their agenda really isn't about the Second Amendment, because the Second Amendment is about the militia. And self-protection is important, but it is a happy benefit of a well-regulated militia.
Right.
And when you try to divorce the two, you end up with circumstances where the right to keep and bear arms becomes circumscribed by whatever manner the government sees fit to enforce at the time.
Right. Now, you were part of the National Guard. Were you military before that?
I was part of the state guard. My military career, I went through ROTC at Vanderbilt University. Got commissioned as a second lieutenant in the Army. Spent 2 years active duty, 6 years in the reserves. Part of that time was in the National Guard. Got completely discharged in 1984, and then I joined the State Guard, which is an all-volunteer, non-compensated force that reports to the National Guard, but is not part of the federal force.
This is the state of Tennessee.
State of Tennessee. We're created by an act of the legislature of the state of Tennessee. We carried ID cards. I had a commission that was signed by the Adjutant General of the state of Tennessee, bearing the seal of the state of Tennessee. So I mean, it was a legitimate state-recognized organization, which was created as an armed reserve force for the National Guard whenever it's called up, and it's been called up constantly since the 90s.
I know in part of your argument to the Supreme Court, I remember reading that there was a question of whether or not the state of Tennessee actually needed to have a Guard unit. Can you talk more about that?
Well, it's not a question for the Supreme Court to even decide whether they need it or not, because the militia, which is what the states are authorized, which is what the states own. I mean, the militia pre-exists the Constitution, and it's recognized by the Constitution as necessary for the security of a free state. So really, when you get down to it, the federal government can't guarantee a Republican form of government to each state without guaranteeing that they have the means to be able to maintain their own militias, because the Constitution calls for the Congress to call out the militia for three discrete purposes, which is to suppress insurrections, repel invasions, and enforce the laws. So while Congress has the power to call out the militia for those instances, the states have a likewise obligation to maintain an efficient militia so that it can be of use to the federal government, because it is, as the Constitution says, necessary to the security of the free state. And the militia today has to have the same meaning as what the militia meant to the framers of the Constitution, because the only way you can change the meaning of any term of the Constitution is by constitutional amendment, and that hadn't happened. Court order or legislative action, if it's in conflict with the Constitution, is null and void from the day it occurs.
Now, you spent some time in jail because of the fact that you had some weapons that were built by you, or
right. I had 9 what is defined as a machine gun by federal law.
Where did you get the machine guns from?
I bought demilled to ATF specification parts kits that are on the open market. You can buy them through the mail. No, there's no control on them. They're not firearms, but they are rather easily rebuilt to their original configuration. I never converted any weapons. All the weapons I had, I mean, they were the real deal to start with. They were machine guns from start to finish, and that's what
these like there's a very popular weapon is the AR-15. Did you have any of these type of weapons?
No, I had no AR-15s because I don't like that cartridge. I did have Browning 30 caliber machine guns, which were adapted to fire the .308 cartridge, which is a standard military cartridge of the United States Army now. The reason being that I wanted to have weapons where we could get resupplied by the United States government if we were ever called into the service.
Okay. Well, we're out here with the Ron Paul crowd, the Campaign for Liberty in here in New Orleans. What kind of message would you like to get out right now that's on your mind that you're thinking about?
We will never be able to change the system in this country until each individual steps up and challenges unconstitutional laws. If we keep our mouths shut and take no action against them, they're just going to keep on doing what they're doing. I like to use the analogy of a frog in a pot of water. You can't boil a frog by throwing him into a boiling pot, but if you put him in the pot when it's cold and gradually turn the heat up, you can boil him, and that's what's happening to our liberties. And until each and every man stands up, woman too, stands up and number one, you got to know your liberties, know what your rights are, and number two, you got to exercise them. We're going to lose them. We're already losing them. When I cross over that river and I stand face to face with my ancestors who fought in the Revolution, the War of 1812, and especially the War for Southern independence, and if they ask me what I did to promote liberty in my time, I want to say something better than I voted Republican.
Right,
I'll leave you with a quote from the Tennessee Constitution.
All right, let's do that.
It says that government being instituted for the common benefit, the doctrine of non-resistance to arbitrary and oppressive power is absurd, slavish, and destructive of the good and happiness of mankind. That's in the Tennessee Declaration of Rights. People need to understand what their rights are and they need to exercise them.
All right, that's a great quote. All right, folks, hope you enjoyed.